On June 11th, 2026, 330 people arrived at Snow Basin to do something extraordinary, but each one of them had their own reason for being there. Some were there to prove something to themselves. Some were there to rediscover something about themselves. Some were there because a friend talked them into signing up. Some weren't even sure they belonged there. And some were carrying all of that at once. But every single one of them was willing and ready to find out. Over the next 36 hours, those 330 athletes would climb up that mountain over and over again, one step at a time. Today, I'm going to share my experience taking on something called 29-029. And by the end, I think you'll find your own Everest hiding in there somewhere too. Welcome back to the Seasons of Joy podcast. My name is Jill Pack, and this is episode number 208, entitled My Everest. As I mentioned in the introduction, people signed up for the 29-029 Everesting event for all kinds of reasons. If I'm honest, I probably fit into every one of those categories. I wanted to see if I was strong enough to do it, to experience something really hard that pushed me. And I did have a dear friend reach out to ask me if I would do it with her. I said yes, and here we are. I'm hoping to have her on the podcast soon so she can share her own Everest. Before I tell you about my experience, however, I want to give you some context on what this event actually is. Their website says it best. 29-029 was created to give ordinary people the opportunity to do something extraordinary. We bring together a small group of like-minded people for a weekend experience, so transformational that it will unlock a better version of you. They believe that going through hard things changes people. This challenge is measured in vertical feet, not distance. They rent a ski mountain for 3 days, and they give people the chance to climb 29,029 vertical feet, the height of Mount Everest. You hike up, take the gondola down, and repeat. It's not a race. There are no age groups, no records to break. It's just you versus you. There are 7 mountains where 29-029 is happening this year, and the first of the season, and the one I did, was at Snow Basin in Utah. To reach Everest elevation there, you need to summit the mountain 13 times in under 36 hours. And over the course of the event, you climb the combined elevation of the 7 tallest peaks on each continent. And I'm going to try to say them without butchering it. Cusco, Vinson, Elbrus, Kilimanjaro, Denali, Aconcagua, and Everest. Everyone who finishes all 13 climbs in time gets the famous red hat. Now, I trained for this event for 6 months with a specific 20-week plan leading up to it. I had a few minor injuries along the way, but nothing very serious. I felt strong physically and emotionally. And I told myself that just signing up for this event was already a win. However many summits I got, it would be worth celebrating. I was surprised, actually, how calm I felt the week of the event. I'd put in the time, and I just felt like I was going to accomplish this goal. The evening before the challenge, all the participants gathered together for dinner, and they had speakers, and every one of them was motivating. And here are some of the things that stood out to me. They said, "This mountain will humble you. Lean into being gritty. Embrace the discomfort. It's part of the experience. Be grateful and open. Feel it all. Don't wish the hard moments away. Practice gratitude. Stay positive. Embrace the sunsets, the sunrises, and the people. Don't let comfort get in the way of doing something extraordinary. This event is about climbing 2 mountains, the one on the outside and the one on the inside. Growth happens in the messy places, and we're not supposed to be perfect when things are hard. On the other side of struggle is growth. On the other side of the mountain is a version of yourself that knows more and is capable of more." I let those words sink in. I'd already decided I wanted to be present for this experience, to engage with other people on the mountain instead of just disappearing into my headphones. I wanted to soak it all in. There's a moment in the recap video 29029 put out after our Snow Basin event. A man hiking who says, "I had the chance to give up, but I didn't." That's exactly me. 13 climbs is Everest. I did 11. Some people would call that falling short. 18 hours in, I felt like a failure too. I was dealing with stomach issues, losing energy fast, feeling completely discouraged, and I'll get to that. But first, let me take you through the day. The event started at 6 a.m. with breakfast beforehand. I forced myself to eat knowing I needed the fuel. We had until 6 p.m. Saturday evening, 36 hours to climb 29,029 feet across 13 summits of just over 2,300 feet each. My plan was 3 summits before lunch, 3 before dinner, 3 before sleeping a little bit, and then that would just leave 4 summits for Saturday. It was clean, simple, perfect on paper. My friend Leanne and I had done a training hike together a few weeks before this event. She lives out of state, so this was as close as we were going to get to training together in person, and we felt good about it. The night before the event started, organizers told us to approach this with some selfishness, to pay attention to your own body, hike at your own pace, rest when you need to. So standing at the base that morning, I'd already decided I didn't want to slow Leanne down, and in the end, that turned out to be the right call. There we were, 6 a.m., looking up at a mountain that suddenly looked a lot steeper than it had the day before. What had we signed up for? They rang the bell and off we went. And Leanne and I stayed close for the first couple of laps, but I could tell her pace was faster than mine. And by lap 3, I was on my own, though never really alone, because the mountain was full of hikers. That's actually one of the best parts of this whole thing, the people. I met a man and his wife celebrating their 40th birthdays together by doing this event. A man chasing redemption after falling short on laps the year before. A young mom whose husband had encouraged her to sign up and who was out there volunteering all day to support her. A woman who'd just turned 60, determined to prove to herself she could still do hard things. She proved it. A father and his 2 sons who'd flown in from New York to do this together. A 17-year-old named Storm was in over his head and pushing through anyway. And Janet. Janet was 77 years old, the oldest participant out there, climbing alongside her son. She didn't get all 13 summits, but she hiked until the very end. And she had her own fan section, a dozen people in matching shirts that said, Team Janet, cheering every time she came to the top of the summit. I wanted a Team Janet shirt so badly. And then there were the volunteers, cowbells, tutus, funny hats, pom-poms, people who had flown in from all over the country just to stand at aid stations for hours straight. Every station sat about 500 feet of elevation apart. And after a while, you'd learn the terrain right before each one. And you could hear the cowbells and cheering before you ever could see anything. They called people by name because we all had these white bibs with our names on them. They hugged us, they celebrated us, just like we'd won something every single lap. I'd leave each station ready for the next climb every time. I wasn't only hearing cheers from the mountain either. The whole way through, my phone kept lighting up with texts and memes from friends and family back home. Some of them were just checking in to see how I was. Some of them were funny and made me laugh out loud. But all of them mattered more than I expected. When you're 18 hours in and your stomach is a mess and you're questioning why you signed up for this, a meme or a text from someone who loves you can carry you further than you think. After my 3rd lap, I came down for lunch. My son was there to cheer me on, which helped because at this point, eating was really hard. On an endurance event like this one, I was supposed to be taking in 35 to 55 grams of carbs per hour. Now, that sounds simple until you're out there and you don't feel hungry at all because you're pushing your body so hard and it's so hot you don't want food anyway. They told us to eat at every meal and to rest at least 30 minutes while we did. And I tried. Lap 4, my stomach started turning. Thankfully, there were hydration and aid stations and porta potties all along the route because I needed every single one of them. Lap 5, same story. Everything just moving through me and my pace slowing down with it. After lap 5, I stopped. I changed my clothes. I got dinner. I still could barely eat, and I hadn't hit my goal of 6 summits before dinner. And the discouragement was setting in. I had my calves massaged in the recovery lounge, and I got my Achilles taped since the steep climbs had worn them down. So then I began heading up for lap 6, and I heard someone yell, "Jillian!" That's my middle name. From the gondola, my husband Phil. He'd come to cheer me on, and I needed it more than I knew. I started tearing up just thinking about seeing him at the top. By the time I reached it, I was wrecked. Lap 6 looked just like laps 4 and 5. Phil walked partway down the summit to meet me, and I remember being so out of it, but so glad to see him. On the gondola ride down, we talked about me doing just 10 laps and calling it good, since I clearly wouldn't have time Saturday to finish all 13. So he suggested I just go to bed and try to get some rest before the next big day. So I did it. I went to sleep. They had set up an entire athlete village with glamping tents, shower trailers, and porta potties, so I had a real place to rest. And thankfully, I was able to sleep. When I woke up, my stomach still felt a little off, but better than the day before. And I made myself get up and eat a real breakfast, even though I just didn't feel like it. At 6 a.m. Saturday morning, I started lap 7. Things were looking up. By 1 p.m., I had already gotten 3 more laps in. On lap 9, I ran into Coach Derek. There were coaches scattered all over the mountain, encouraging hikers, and he recognized me from a few earlier conversations. And he asked me what lap I was on. And I told him 9, hoping to squeeze in 1 more. He looked at me and he said, "You're such a strong hiker. You have such a good pace. I think you could get in 12. And I thought, I am? I could? So I got on the gondola for lap 10. And lap 10 was hard, maybe my slowest lap of the day. But I kept going, one step at a time. And as I came up to the top, people were cheering, and Phil was there waiting, expecting me to call it. But as I approached the announcer, she asked the question that every coach asks as you get to that summit top. What's your plan? Are you going to stop and rest? Or are you going to keep going? And somewhere in that last stretch of lap 10, Coach Derek's words came back to me, and I realized I actually had time for 1 more lap. So I said, "I'm going for 1 more." And the announcer yelled, "She's going for 1 more." And the crowd cheered. Phil was totally surprised. We rode the gondola down to the base to burn the board where I branded my 10th mountain into the wood. Before I started up my 11th lap, another coach asked me the same question. It was 3:42. I had 2 hours and 18 minutes left. Tight, but I believed I could do it. "I'm going for 1 more," I told her. And she told me that she would be leaving the base in about 45 minutes, and I needed to know that because if she caught up to me, then I would be pulled off the course. As long as I stayed ahead, though, I could finish. So I went for it. Those first 500 feet are some of the hardest of the whole 2,300 feet of the lap, and I just focused on the next step. At the hydration station, I stopped for electrolytes, and just behind me was a man in a red bib. He was on his 13th and final ascent, and you know this because when someone's on their last lap, they switch out the white bib for a red bib. He was walking with a coach. He moved ahead of me, and I fell into step with the coach. Her name was Dawn, and she'd been asked to stay with him because he'd had some medical issues earlier, and they wanted to make sure he was safe, that there were eyes on him. So we just followed a little bit behind him, and we talked about all kinds of things for the next hour, while I just kept putting 1 foot in front of the other. I was the last official hiker on the mountain. Also, the one hoping the coach behind me at the base never caught up. At every aid station, I could feel the adrenaline building. I was close. On the last steep section, I passed a few hikers who'd been ahead of me for quite a while. Then we hit the fire road. That's the final stretch before the finish. Coach Dawn took my pack from me to carry the rest of the way, and then she stayed back with some of those other hikers. I held my pace and I pushed. Coming around the last bend, I could hear the crowd before I could see the flags. And then I was there, the announcer calling my name, and the whole crowd with her. "Congratulations, Jill. Good job, Jill. You did it, Jill." And when asked which ascent I had just finished, I told her 11. And the crowd cheered, and it felt incredible. I was exhausted and somehow full of energy at the same time. I thought about how discouraged I had been the night before, how much like a failure I'd felt. And standing there, I understood in that moment that this was never really about the number. It was about the effort I gave until there was nothing left to give. As Phil and I rode the gondola down for the last time, I was just full of gratitude. The mountain did humble me. I had leaned into being gritty and I'd embraced the discomfort, and I did something extraordinary. I tried to stay positive and cheer the people climbing alongside me. I soaked up the views, the sunsets, the sunrises, the people. I climbed that mountain 11 times. Some would call that falling short. I'd call it climbing the mountain inside me too. It was messy. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did something really hard, and I came down the other side a little different than I went up. I learned a little more about who I am and what I'm actually capable of. But I keep thinking about something. Not everyone is going to climb 29,029 vertical feet on a ski mountain in Utah, but every single one of us has an Everest of our own. Maybe yours isn't a mountain at all. Maybe it's a marriage you're working to repair, or a child you're learning how to love differently than you expected, or a diagnosis, or a season of grief, or a conversation that you keep putting off because you're scared of what might happen if you finally have it. Maybe it's just getting out of bed some mornings and doing the next right thing. Whatever it is, it's yours and it counts. I didn't get all 13 summits. I got 11. But I showed up. I kept going when I wanted to quit. I let people see me struggle, and I let them cheer me up the mountain anyway. That's the part that actually changes you, not the number you finish with, the willingness to keep climbing. So here's my invitation to you. Think about your own Everest, the thing in your life right now that feels too steep, too long, too uncertain. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to finish all 13 laps. You just have to keep taking the next step, one step at a time. That's how mountains get climbed, yours and mine. If you have a mountain, real or figurative, that you are trying to climb and you want someone to cheer you on and walk alongside you as you do it, I would love to be your coach. I offer one-on-one coaching, and you can book a free clarity conversation to see what it's like to work with me at seasons-coaching.com. I'll include a link in the show notes. Until next time, have a joyful week.